I'm Jennifer Page, and you're watching Eclectic Arts Media.
When I did the vocals for the chorus of the Phantom of the Opera.
Hello!
Hi, Chloe. How are you?
I'm so good. How are you?
I'm doing really good.
Someone was just leaving the bar with a beer, and then there was this opening, and I just felt myself climbing onto the bar.
It feels kind of like we were laughing about it last night, a family band in a way, because, you know, and that's really exciting as well because, you know, it feels a little bit more like home when you're on tour and stuff.
And you're watching Eclectic Arts Media.
Well, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you are in the world. I'm Mark Sugiyama from Eclectic Arts Media, based here in Seattle, Washington. And thank you so much for joining me on this Wednesday, the 20th of March, 2024. Happy spring, everybody. And my guest today has been entertaining music fans for decades. Her illustrious career has included many genres of music, including rock, metal, blues, and jazz, just to name a few. She has a brand new album coming out on April 26th on Metalville called Tattoo Me. It is my great pleasure to welcome back to the Eclectic Arts Media Virtual Studio, Miss Lee Aaron.
Hey, good to be here, Mark. Yay.
Hey, how are you doing, Lee?
I'm doing great, actually. Yeah, it's just I'm here on the West Coast, and I don't know what it's like in Seattle right now, but I'm in the Vancouver area, and we're having some very beautiful weather here for March, which is kind of unusual, and that's nice. It's not rainy and depressing.
That sounds like how Seattle was, because on the weekend we hit like record high temperatures on Saturday and Sunday. Yesterday was beautiful, and so was Monday. Today's kind of gray.
Oh, okay. We're still having some sunshine up here. I feel lucky.
Yeah, you guys in Vancouver are doing better than us. So you have a brand new album called Tattoo Me coming out, and
yeah.
The concept is that it's cover material. So when did you come up with this concept and trying to figure out the songs and what you're going to record and all of that?
Oh, that's kind of a loaded question. So we decided to do a covers album when we were actually late April. We were on the Monsters of Rock cruise last year, and we were having dinner one night as a band, and we were like, you know, what's our next big musical adventure going to be? It's going to be, you know, what are we going to do? Let's do something fun. And I think it was maybe Sean Kelly just said, why don't we do a covers record? That would be super fun. You know, we'll just do some material that originally the idea was to just sort of cover some material that sort of lit a fire in our hearts when we were teenagers. But it evolved over the course of several months of us talking back and forth about the project and stuff, because, you know, none of us really stopped being inspired or stopped being fans of music when we were 18 years old. So we're like, you know, like, so there's things ranging on this album from literally the 60s to the 2000s. And I mean, I think it makes it better in a way. And so it just, the song selection kept evolving as we were digging in. And yeah, I'm pretty happy with it, the way it turned out, though. I think it's pretty cool. And it's you know, Dolly Parton just did a covers record, the Rock Star album. And all due respect to Dolly, I think she's an incredible artist, and I love her, but that's kind of not what I wanted this record to be. She kind of did everybody's biggest hit and did a duet. And, you know, it was as much music as it was marketing, really, for that. And that's wonderful for her. But, you know, we kind of wanted to dig into some deeper album cuts for some of this, and keep it challenging for ourselves as musicians, and do things that, you know, were meaningful to us and really touched our hearts. So yeah.
Well, I love the track that you guys as a band went that way, because I was just going to mention, and one of the things I put down as a question was that I love it when there's cover material where I'm not sure what the song is or who the original artist was. So then I start digging backwards. Even if we look at like the Tattoo music video, I'm like, who did this original? I didn't even know. So I was digging around and seeing the 77s and listening to their version. So that's great when I get turned on to other music. So I love the fact that you guys looked at more of a personal take on what you're going to do for song recording.
Yeah, well, that song, Tattoo Me, my husband had played me that song, I don't know, maybe a decade ago. He was a fan of the 77s. They're kind of an obscure California band. Well, I wouldn't, maybe not obscure, but just not popular in all circles. And I heard that tune, and I was just like, man, I love that song. It's sort of like, I love the sentiment of the lyric that if you love me enough, if I'm important enough to you, that you're going to tattoo me on you. And that's kind of how we feel about music as well. And that, and I loved that it was kind of, the original groove was a little bit swaggery and stonesy. And I said, if I ever do a covers record, I'm going to cover that song. And there we did it, and it's just not well known enough that you kind of hear it. And because we kind of put our signature sound on it, it almost sounds like a Lee Yarn original, really. So
That's very true. I was going to mention that what's nice for people out there that aren't familiar with the song, after this interview, if you go back and listen to the original, you'll see exactly what Lee's talking about. That they've stayed to the the structure of the song, but then it's got their sound on it, which is a nice mix of it. So like you didn't completely do it like exactly the way it was done originally, but it's so close to it, and then it's also modernized too. That's like this is a really nice mix of these worlds.
Oh, thanks. Well, I mean, there's an art in itself to being an interpreter of other people's material, and we tried to approach that on a song to song basis. Some songs, it felt to me that they really didn't need to move very far away arrangement wise or approach wise from the original. And then other songs we pulled further in another direction. Like a good example, one of the last songs we recorded for the album was the song Teenage Kicks. And it is the last track on the album. And it was a very spontaneous kind of like, we were talking at Kelly and I were talking on the phone, and somehow that song got floated, and we were just like, ooh. He's like, I got chills. I go, I just got chills. We were like, well, let's just do it. We were looking for one more up-tempo tune to put on the record, and so we ended up recording it the next day. That song, there wasn't anything to really change. It's just kind of the ultimate kind of hard rock / just punk enough song to all about, teenage sexual angst. And we thought, let's just leave it just the way it is, because it's perfect. Of course, there's a female vocal, and that makes it a little bit different. And then you take a song like The Pusher. The version that we did is closer to the Nina Simone version than any other version. I mean, Hoyt Axton wrote it. The other band that did it, I'm sorry, it's escaping me right now, had a very popular version of it. And then the Nina version was just a live version. She played at some festival, I think in France, but it's one of my favorite Nina Simone songs. And our version of The Pusher, because we did it with guitars, not with piano, and it just kind of evolved into its own animal. And it's a fair amount away from the original Hoyt Axton version. But it works, right? So, so we tried to just stay really authentic to ourselves while we were doing versions of other people's songs, if that makes any sense.
It does, and that's really, again, I think a really smart way to go about it, so that you're that you are marrying those worlds. And like you said, this song, we don't need to do anything to this. I mean, we're totally feeling it. We're going to record it the way it was. But then the other one, we're going to kind of keep working on it and seeing what happens, and it kind of takes us down a different path. And it's still, the song that inspired us, but now it's kind of our flavor a little bit more into it than maybe a different track on the record. And I love that kind of thing, because if I want to hear something note for note, it's like, well, just listen to the original, basically. Then if that's what you're going to do, it's no different than when they remake movies.
Right.
Yeah. And since there's 11 songs that ended up on the album, did you get to a point where you had like a pseudo final list that was like maybe 20 songs and you had to kind of whittle it down to the 11, or how was that process?
Yeah, it didn't really quite work like that. You know, uh, I had certain artists, although I didn't necessarily have the songs picked out at that time. I had certain artists I really wanted to cover. I wanted to cover Something by Heart because Anne and Nancy Wilson were hugely influential to me. I've said many times I wouldn't be a girl rocker if it wasn't for those ladies. Um, I wanted to uh, cover a Fleetwood Mac tune. I wanted to do a Nina Simone song. I always, from the time I was 20, I wanted to do a cover of Elton John's Someone Saved My Life Tonight. We tried to choose, what was important to me was to choose songs that were not done to death. And if you go on YouTube, I mean, you can see, 200 versions of a girl singing Barracuda, in their basement into a microphone. And so why would I do that? Right. So I wanted to choose something that was unique from these artists that I really wanted to cover. And then the guys in the band, they had lots of ideas too. And they floated ideas, but the bottom line is I had to sing it, right? And I had to make it sound authentic. So they all kind of went through the filter of me in the end. So the truth is everyone did have a bit of a hand, like the Jet song, Are You Going to Be My Girl? Dave, I've always loved that tune, but Dave Reimer came up with it and we had a meeting and he's like, it would be great. And I'm like, that is a great idea. I love that song too. So the beautiful thing about the way that we work together as a band is we are kind of a creative collective and, everything, the executive decisions kind of go through me in the end, but everyone really does have a contribution and a voice here and a part in this. We talked about doing an Alice Cooper tune, but my husband came up with Is It My Body? He's like, that would be a really fun song to do. And he thought it would also be ironic and funny from a girl's perspective, a woman's perspective, as well as the fact that What You Do to My Body was one of my biggest hits, So
Yeah, well, that's great that you have such a collective, as you mentioned, of the band members kind of putting input in the way that you guys approach things. It's not someone dictating to someone else. It's kind of like, hey, I have an idea. Let's kind of talk about it and see, what's is kind of resonating with each other. And then, like you said, you kind of have like maybe an executive say over things, but that's like no, there's a bunch of input coming in from the other guys in the band, and it really works out well. And I'm kind of curious that with the wide variety of artists that you covered, have you met any of these artists in person, just in general, over the years, like the Sisters from Heart or Nina Simone or anybody else like that?
Well, I'd love to have met Nina Simone, but no. Heart, yes, on a couple of occasions. I've played with them and got a chance to meet them. And Nancy's so nice. I mean, the last time we played together, we sort of talked about our kids and motherhood and what it was like to be a girl rocker and trying to do motherhood at the same time. So yes, I've had an opportunity to meet them. I'm just trying to think of who else, never met Zeppelin, would have liked to have. But my husband actually wrote a book that was what came out last year. He wrote a book on Mark Volman it was sort of his life story from the Turtles. The book was called Happy Forever. That's what it was called. My adventures with, and it was all these people talking about Frank and anyway, to make a long story short, Alice Cooper was one of the people that my husband interviewed and who wrote a foreword for the book. And so never played with him, but my husband's got a connection there. So yeah.
Okay, well that's cool. I'm thinking back to gosh, I think this was maybe like the early '90s. We have a music festival over Labor Day weekend called Bumbershoot down here in Seattle, and I remember distinctly that Ann Wilson was just walking around with her friend amongst thousands of people on the grounds at the Seattle Center. No one was bothering. This is pre-cell phone days, of course, but no one's bothering her for an autograph or anything. Just letting her enjoy the festival, just like anybody else. And I'm like, is that man, Ann Wilson over there? And people are kind of doing the same thing, but they're just giving her space and being respectful.
That's great.
Yeah, and I'm so glad to see them back together on the road doing their thing. So that's been huge.
Yeah, I was very sad for a few years. I'm like, why don't they just get back together and, figure out their problems and, but I guess they've managed to walk through it and past it, and now they're gigging it together again, which is fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. And so since we're talking about Heart, the song on your album is "Even It Up" that you cover, and is that song, like you mentioned, you weren't trying to find Barracuda or something that's just like, or crazy for you or crazy on you. Um, was there another song besides "Even It Up" that you're kind of looking at, like maybe this one or this one?
Well, so like I said, you can find like a gazillion girls singing Barracuda on YouTube, and Crazy on You. That is a kind of song where you go, how could you ever do it better, right? And what is the point of trying to do a cover if you can't really own it, or do it equally, at least as good, or if not better? And so I made a decision not to try Crazy on You. Magic Man was a song that we were floating to record. In fact, our idea was to put it against some kind of industrial kind of drum loop and make it a little more almost like heavy Nine Inch Nails-ish kind of approach. And then Dolly Parton announced that she was doing a covers record, and she did Magic Man, and she was going to do a duet with him. And I'm like, dang, that's off the table. And so I started exploring some other songs I might like to record. And I landed on Even It Up, and I'll tell you why. Number one, I mean, I loved those early Heart records, but Even It Up, that album, the Baby Lestrange album, was 1980. And I was 17 years old when that album came out. And it was just, I don't know, I was getting ready to graduate from high school. I was in my first rock band. I wanted hair. I wanted to look exactly like they looked on the cover with their big permed hair and their chokers. And like, they were so badass and so cool. And I just like, so that album was really special for me. And it was the first album where they had broken away from their partnership relationship with the Fisher Brothers and were completely independent. And what I loved about Even It Up, it's, if you really listen closely, the more I listened to that song, I went, this is a really, really early feminist song about equality of the sexes. And I don't think people listened to it through that lens when it came out. But here you roll forward 44 years, and that is absolutely the lens that I hear it through. And that was really meaningful to me because it's no secret. I write songs about female empowerment on just about every record I've ever done. So that was something that really resonated with me.
Okay, yeah, no, that's a really good point too about that lens. If you listen to the lyrics on that song, back when it was originally released, people are probably looking at it just as a song, as a single. Not, are you listening to the lyrics? And especially, yeah, here in 2024, where we're at with things, that's really important to be looking at things. And I've can't quite see in my background, but I have mainly female artists on my backdrop. So.
I know you like female artists.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I see we have some people that are saying hi from Argentina right now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and we have someone else that said wants another cover album already. It's like, well, let's get the first one out and we'll kind of see if there's
what did they say?
They would like to see another covers album already.
Oh, okay.
So this one's coming out next month. Maybe, I don't know, another year or something. Well, interesting. But and then anybody else, if you have a quick question, just join into the chat on YouTube or Twitch, and then I'll get it up on screen here as quickly as possible. But we're kind of coming to the end of our time. I know it had been mentioned that the Elton John song that you covered on the album was something that, especially if you go back, like you mentioned, to your teenage years, was something that you listened to like almost like on a loop kind of a thing back in the day.
Yes.
So it obviously means a great deal to you personally. So how was it trying to record that song, doing your version of it?
So yeah, like I love that song for so many reasons. It's funny, I was just talking to somebody about this in another interview that, for me growing up as a young teenage girl, that was sort of like, I think I was 13 when that album came out, the Yellow Brick Road album. And it was such an immersive experience for me, because not back then we didn't have video, and we, you know, or any of the social media channels to connect with our artists. So we were connecting through our artists by looking at photographs and artwork on album covers, and all of the artwork on that album, those little pictures that went with all the songs, it was like an immersive experience. I remember laying on my rec room floor, just looking through, you know, the gatefold of that Yellow Brick Road album, and, you know, just being enamored by it. And, you know, Someone Saved My Life Tonight. I know what it means for Elton. But the reality is, most ballads that appear on albums, or most ballads, aren't usually written at an uplifting time in your life. Most ballads are like, man, I'm shattered, I'm going to sit down and write a ballad, right? And so that song can mean so many different things to so many different people. For me, you know, my home life was a little bit tumultuous for me when I was at that age. And, you know, I think I wanted to be rescued from my suburban crazy home life at that point. And, but for other people, it could be any situation in their life. Everyone has something they want to be rescued from. Right. And that's why that song was so meaningful to me. And, I always, in my head, again, that was one of the ones that had been on the table for many years for me, when, okay, if I ever do this song, I'm not going to sit down and play it on piano. I mean, I've played piano ballads on my previous records. I heard it being done with acoustic guitars, like you're sitting around a campfire and you're playing an Elton John song, and strummy acoustics. And so that's what I relate to Sean, my guitarist. And I think he did a fabulous job. Once we got into it, I realized that it was a little more complicated than I thought, in that the building blocks really of that song that sort of take it from the very stripped down beginning to the big, you know, someone save, someone save, someone save, all those layered vocals are the harmony vocals and all the layered vocals. And once we got the basic track done, I'm like, dude, man, I'm going to have to sit down here and like make a vocal map so I know what I'm actually doing. And I did. And Dave came over, my bass player, who's a wonderful singer as well. And we just laid down vocal after vocal after vocal after vocal. And I think there were about 69 tracks on that album, or that song, sorry.
Wow.
Yeah. But the whole idea is, when you hear it as a finished piece of work that's mixed, you're not sitting there going, oh, I think there's probably 70 tracks on this record. It just, you know, sounds the way it's supposed to sound.
Right. Yeah. It comes across to the listener like this is what you wanted to get across. It doesn't matter if it took, you know, 16 tracks or took 69 tracks. But
yeah,
from the working side of it, it's like, oh man, that sounds like a lot of tracks to work with. But then speaking of which, with this album as well, you're the producer, and sounds like you guys were recording in your own studios. Is that correct, to put the tracks together?
That's correct. So yeah, I've actually produced all my albums since 2000. A lot of people don't know that. And producer's role obviously is to, as a producer, you decide the material going on the record and the arrangements and the musical elements that are going to make up each song. And I just really dig it. I really like it. I really like that. I have a home studio. It's not huge and elaborate with a bunch of outboard gear, because I don't need that, because I can, when it comes to the actual mixes in the end, I can take it into another studio to mix, or I can send it off to a couple of mixers that I love and trust to have mixes done with more outboard gear. But yeah, I just love the beauty of being able to record at home, deciding what I want on the album. I can record a vocal track, and if I'm not happy with it, I can get up tomorrow and go and record another one in my pajamas if I want. If I can experiment, like I can put down some keyboard parts and go, you know, listen back and go, that's really working, but that part's not working so much. Well, I'm just going to delete that track and I'm going to try something with this sound next. And so I love the, I just find with being able to do overdubbing, especially in my own studio, it just gives me a lot more liberty to make changes, to be creative, to be spontaneous without, like when you're in a big studio and you're doing like, because I have, you know, I mean, obviously I did records back when we were like stretching all the way across the mixing console, and you work that fader and I got to work this fader on the SSL back in the early 80s when we were making records, right? But you're kind of under the microscope when you're in a big studio and you're cutting your vocals, and like, you know, you cut a vocal and, you know, it's not your best vocal and you're like, oh my God, everybody in the control room just heard me choke on that track, you know? And so it's definitely a lot more pressure. Plus the clock's ticking away and every minute's costing you X amount of dollars. And so I just love the liberty of having that creative space at my own home to be able to do what I want. It's a great thing.
Yeah, and you definitely hit on some of the biggest points too, is that you have this freedom to kind of not feel this, you're on the clock, you're on this pressure, you got this time kind of a thing going on when you're in the studio. It's like, well, I can work on this, and then, you know what, I'm not quite sure if I like that, but I'll come back to it tomorrow and kind of listen to it again, instead of like, no, you need to listen to it now, and then, you know, you're going to cut another track or you're not. And, you know, we got
or your engineer's going, nope, sorry, no time to do that. We're on to guitars tomorrow. We have to stay on schedule. And that is also what a producer does, is keeps you on schedule when you're in a big studio. And again, I can do that with mixes. It's like we have one song a day for mixing, but it's definitely harder when you're trying to do the creative part of it and the overdubbing and doing some experimenting in the studio. I mean, years ago when there was like gazillion-dollar budgets for albums, we had the liberty of doing that. We'd go in the studio and just kind of live there for 3 months. We sometimes would write songs in the studio. But the reality is the records, we don't make enough money back anymore. Artists don't make enough money back from physical product unless you're Taylor Swift, you know? So the idea, you're dreaming to think that you can just go in a studio for that amount of time and make a record and ever see a return like that anymore. So
that's unfortunately very, very true. And I mean, anytime I've done interviews with you, I always grab my albums of yours.
Okay.
they're off camera, but they're right here. I'm just kind of glancing down at one of them as we wrap up this interview. So I can tell you the story quickly, that I was in jazz band in junior high, and we did a band competition up in Abbotsford, up in British Columbia.
Okay.
And I just remember that my goal, because I had seen an article about you in Kerrang magazine, was that I need to find the Aaron, because I couldn't find anything down here in the States at that time. And so during our break, my friends and I, we went to some local mall there, and I found a music store, and that's when I found this. And
oh my gosh.
So yeah, I'm like, this is, you know, the Lee Aaron project with the bonus track on it, and that was my start to becoming a fan of your music. And I've got all these other albums, and I won't get into all that stuff there, but
no, that's great though. That's wonderful.
Yeah, and I remember like being really protective, trying to bring it back so that no one messed with it and touched it and everything. And maybe kind of quickly, what do you remember about that experience with that first Lee Aaron project recording and that album?
Oh, wow. You're taking me way back. I was just literally such a naive young girl. I was 18 when I was making that record. I think it came out when I was 19. By the time we actually got the deal, the distribution deal and the stuff. And my first manager had teamed me up with a bunch of musicians that he had connections with. So I worked with some of the guys from Moxie. I worked with Rick Emmett. I worked with the guys from Santers. Buzz Sherman from Moxie came in and sang a duet with me. And, you know, I just remember being a bit very naive and wide-eyed. And it was some of my very first songwriting, really legitimate songwriting experiences. I worked with the guys in Santers. And I mean, I look back now and I kind of laugh at those, you know, early songs. And at some of the lyrics I was writing and things like that, because it's really hard to connect with stuff you did 40 years ago when 40 years later, right? But yeah, I remember Rick Sanders being very patient with me because he was a more experienced writer and helping walk me through some stuff. Buzz Sherman was really gracious in the studio, gave me some vocal pointers. He had such a fantastic voice on, warming up and how to preserve my vocal cords. And again, he was very, very gracious and patient with me. And Rick Emmett, I remember when Rick Emmett came and did those background vocals, he did a bunch of background vocals on this song called Under the Stars that I'd written with another guitarist named Dave Applin. And I remember just really being wide-eyed and watching and learning. And I took a lot away from that first album in terms of how to work in a studio. I learned a lot about, proximity to microphone technique. Buzz was showing me stuff like that. I remember when Rick had recorded those really beautiful sort of counterpoint block harmonies in Under Your Spell. I remember learning from him that, you can actually write a whole other melody that is a counterpoint to your main melody, and you can add harmonies and float it in the background in the mix there, and it becomes like a secondary hook in your chorus. And I was like, wow, what a great thing, and I remember, that's a takeaway that you probably historically see on almost every Lee Aaron record. It's a technique that I've used again and again and again, and I learned that from working with Rick. So I just learned a lot of really beautiful musical lessons and recording lessons on making that first record.
Wow, that's amazing. And also that, like, some of those techniques, like you just mentioned from Rick, that they kept on going through your songwriting and your subsequent albums and things of that nature. It's so interesting. So for me as a fan, knowing that that's where it came from. And Lee, as we're getting ready to wrap this up, obviously you have the music video out for Tattoo or Tattoo Me. What is coming up? You have more music videos, or what's going to be coming up for this album?
So we just finished filming on Monday for another video. That video is dropping on the 5th of April. It's for Even It Up. That's the second single off the Covers record. And it's really cool. I got a pair of boxing gloves on. I don't know exactly what my guy's gonna do with it in terms of the editing, but I'll be seeing that shortly and chiming in. And so, yeah, I'm excited. And we start touring at the end of April. And we're doing a bunch of cross-Canada Canadian dates this summer and into the fall. And in November, I'm going to Switzerland. And we're headlining a boutique festival outside Zurich called You Rock. And it's going to be really cool. It's going to be... it's the 40th anniversary of Metal Queen. So I'm going to pull some tracks from that album into that set, as well as some of my hits. It's going to be a really special show for fans.
Wow, you're going to be busy.
Yeah.
And I think I've asked this in my other interviews with you. Is there any chance of you dropping down to the US for a string of shows or anything like that? Or just like, it's just too hard to try to juggle all of it?
Well, it's not such a matter of that. Again, I'd have to go into a lot of business detail explaining the politics of it. But now, of course, with, online sales, albums are sort of available everywhere. And so having a US record deal is not something that's super important to me. But back in my heyday, some of the material that people most remember me from, I was in a Canadian record deal at the time, a Canadian contract that wouldn't allow me to sign a record deal with anybody out. They owned my foreign licensing rights, basically. So I couldn't go and sign to a US label despite interest because I was still owned by a Canadian label. It was up to the powers that be there to get me distribution in the States. And there were a variety of different factors as to why that never happened. I know that at one point my Canadian label was looking to get a distribution deal for the entire label and wouldn't just let me go And then at another time, they were trying to start up an American leg of the label, but never reached their goal in terms of how many millions of dollars of financing they needed to launch that and get it off the ground. So I kind of went through my career with my two biggest albums in Canada, which was Body Rock and Some Girls Do, missing my American label release window. Not because of lack of interest, not because of lack of good music. It was all business politics. And as a result, I kind of have this really cool cult following in the United States, but I don't have the kind of following down there that merits me, getting the opening slot on the Motley Crue tour, like Joan Jett or something like that. So it's more of a political problem than anything else. I would love to come to the States, and I'm going to get on the phone to my manager the moment I get off here and talk to him, because I know there are a few American festivals that love bringing in Canadian bands. I think like Rocklahoma is one of them. And I think I need to push him to work harder at that.
Yes, please. That would be amazing if you're down here in the States playing one of the big festivals that are coming up in the summertime. But Lee, thank you so much for taking the time, and I wish you all the success with the new album. Again, it's coming out on April 26th, folks, on Metalville. And I was a fan back when I was 15, 14. I'm a fan now, as I'm older than that. and I always will be. So thank you so much.
It was awesome talking to you, Mark. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Yeah, until next time. Hey.
Yes, absolutely.
All right.